Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on day one here of Cannes Lion. There is so much going on. I feel like, my goodness, I just could sort of walk back and forth in just a couple of hundred feet and really soak up so much. So, as does not need my guest here does not need much introduction. I think she's very well known to this crowd and to this community. Sherrese, thank you for taking time out. I know you've been very busy of late. We're going to talk about that.
Well, thank you so much for having me, to the Inkwell, to Adrian for curating this beautiful experience, for all those who are participating in the festival, and thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. I just want to say, I have been to the Inkwell in Martha's Vineyard. It's a wonderful, gorgeous homes you could just look at the ornateness of, and it's a wonderful touch. I love that it's being put here, and for all the right reasons, for sure, which we will talk about. But let's talk about have gathered here to talk about the business. This is very much a business conference. It's a conference of networking and making those connections. Let's start just high level. Media business, especially the traditional media business, it's been on a roller coaster. It seems to be probably at one of the down moments right now. But Sherrese, with HarbourView Equity Partners, you are in the trenches. You are placing bets, you are making your investments, and sort of placing bets on where the media puck is going, as they say. And so let's just start by high level. It's a very tumultuous time in media. What do you see from where you sit as an investor? Where do you see opportunity? Where do you see things that you think this audience should be thinking about in the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure, I'd give the proverbial answer. If I had the crystal ball, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now. I'd be on my yacht in the Antibes and sailing around the world. But
we're close, right?
But we're close. So maybe I do have the answer. No, I think, listen, the media segment right now is obviously going through a lot of changes that you're seeing. A lot of the large institutions, legacy institutions, struggle with what the new format needs to be and what it needs to look like to meet the moment. Audience has been completely disrupted in terms of the way that they engage, and the business has been designed, and we talked about this a little bit in the past, the business has been designed for a different age than where we sit today. We all sit in a very decentralized way that we connect with content. Around the world, people can use a cell phone, they can use their laptops, et cetera. They can engage with content in ways that traditionally only came in through one pipe into their homes or into their lexicon. And now there are multitudes of different ways. What that means, I think, that makes the landscape bright for me in terms of opportunity set is that we're watching more things than we've ever watched before, right? I'm sure if we polled this audience, everybody would have 15 different shows that they watched, and there may be 20% overlap between us, but we'd all be discovering something else new. And the creative energy never dies, and the creative spirit never dies. And so we know that there are expert and brilliant creators out there that are making more and more content every day that's rich with storytelling. So the two, the beginning of the process and the end of the process is robust. What's murky right now is the middle.
The distribution, the getting the great movie or TV show idea, getting it produced on the right platform to the right audience.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder than it just sounds to say.
Exactly. It's a lot harder to get it from this great creative engine that's rich and robust with lots of really amazing creators to the right audience at the right time and, for importantly, the right cost. So you have large platforms that, again, built for another time. I call it the horse and buggy era. They've got barnyards of carriages and stables of horses, and they can't just pivot tomorrow to motorized cars, which is the moment that we're really living in. So seeing that and being an investor like I am, which, they always say never waste a good crisis, it's a moment of opportunity in a lot of ways. And so we're carefully looking at how to make bets with the right content creators in partnership with the right platforms and maybe even with the right brands to bring content at a price to audience to really continue to enrich that audience.
And, you know, an event like this just shows exactly how much opportunity there is in disruption. And these are words now that we've said so much. We've really been talking about this for more than a decade. This is not a new thing, but what is accelerated for sure post-pandemic and now in the last, 12 months is just the sheer amount of platforms, the amount of opportunity. And what's very much represented here is the amount of opportunity for that one-to-one relationship. A social media creator who has the right audience and the right following can go and do a direct deal with one of the biggest, with the Fortune 500 brand. Like, that didn't happen even 10 years ago, let alone 5 years ago. So I'm sure you must see a lot of opportunity in that social media creator space as well.
Yeah, social media creator space, but also just really understanding that being specific to audience, which I think the panel topic is content is queen and audience, global audiences are its king. Being specific and talking to specific audiences, I think, is also a nuance. For a long time, many platforms were really focused on, this 4-quadrant seeking opportunity set. Being everything.
The Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail.
Of being everything to all people all at the same time. And the challenge for that is that's just not the way that we consume. I tell people this story all the time and they'll find it strange, but like my individual tastes are nuanced and they may be specific to me, but they also may not be the thing that you guess, right? And so talking to me about Nordic procedurals is a thing that I watch. And it's strange and it's weird, but we see this every single day in the way that we even track data around music. The audiences are really specific. So find ways to talk to audience specifically about what they're engaged in will lead to better ROI, right? And better ROI on outcome. And so go really deep in who the audience is and be unapologetic about it. And that is a really direct way to seeing ROI in a way that I don't think the old 4-quadrant for all things, for all people, still works. You may still have, things that will break through, but by and large, if you go specific to audience, you see really great rewards. I mean, look no further than Bad Boys 4 that came out this past weekend. If you look and track in the marketing for that, the team went very heavily into the Black and Latino audiences, and they showed up and they showed that the movie was well worth the investment that they made and created a really great ROI on that particular opportunity set. So I'm very big on being very direct and very specific to the audience that you're talking to and making sure that they know that they are cared for, they're seen, and then, the rest will follow.
That you're coming into the space as an investor now, and let's talk about you've made in the things that got my attention. Sherrese and I got to know each other because she started doing deals that got my attention, and I called her up, or I called up her PR reps, and I said, hey, she's doing deals, and I need to know this person. And we got together in an episode. I'm just gonna, forgive me, I'm gonna invade the space and plug Variety's Strictly Business. Yeah. It's a weekly podcast. It's billed. It is a conversations about business. The one I had 2 weeks ago with Sherrese, it's an episode, we come out every Wednesday. And it was one of my favorite conversations because I can always tell when somebody knows what they're talking about and really believes in the strategy they're talking about. Sherrese had no blue cards. She showed up at my office by herself, in the afternoon in the Variety's Midtown Manhattan office. Came in just by herself, and we sat down, and she basically gave a master class on what is happening in media, and you all can access it again. Variety, Strictly Business, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. But I'm proud of that interview just because I thought it really captured things of where things are going, and I believe we're speaking in a little bit of shorthand because of that. But you are, Sherrese and other investors are coming into this space at a time when the biggest of Hollywood studios are literally struggling to make money on the production of movies and TV shows. And if you stop and think about that, that's been their business for some of these companies now 100 years. And in the last 5 to 8 years, they can't really make a profit on it. So that is where somebody like Sherrese, who with your background and 15 years at Morgan Stanley, a lifetime of being a pop culture enthusiast and consumer of all this stuff, that really helps. You can't be a good investor if you don't know the product, whether it's Nordic dramas or regional Mexican music, as you have done with some of your music investments. Let's drill down a little deeper, though. I mean, this is literally a time when Hollywood is trying to figure out. They let the production inflationary effect led it to be, no kidding, $10 to $12 million an episode is not an outrageous price for a drama series by contemporary standards. That is coming down. But can you talk a little bit about where you see that opportunity to go deeper, produce more efficiently, market more efficiently, and build audience for the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, I will give another anecdote of my random television watching, but I think it speaks to the point. Over the Christmas holiday, I watched a bunch of shows. I binge watched a really great period piece. It was, really amazing talent that acted in it, but not particularly household names. Period pieces, what do we think period pieces cost per hour? 5 to 10, and that's probably on the low end.
Those wigs and costumes, they do not come cheap.
I loved it. It was 8 episodes, so let's take 5 on the low end. That's $40 million. And if I said the name to you, many of you wouldn't know it. And so where's the ROI on making $40 million back, even on one of the top streaming platforms, for something that's speaking to a very small segment of the audience? It's really hard to do. So one of the things that the last 10 to 15 years has really accelerated, it's really accelerated the explosion of costs because everybody was naturally aligned to a higher dollar price point, right? So if you're a producer and you get paid points on a budget, and the budget's $100 and you get paid 20 points, $20 is way more than $10 if you only made it for $50. So the business has been aligned to increase costs over the last 10 to 15 years because of the cost plus model, which then has made the infrastructure and the cost infrastructure so challenging to actually make it be ROI accretive. And I think what the challenge for that is, particularly if you start talking about, while we're here at the Inkwell, things that are for inclusive audiences, is that is disempowering. Because there's only but so many people who have the resources to make a $40 million, let's just take a flyer on it series about a period piece of a great group of talent that's really interesting, nice, interesting, diverse cast. But there's only so many people who can do that. So now you've created a barrier to entry. You've created a gatekeeper to say yes or no. I'm gonna approve that $40 million to make these 8 episodes. To hope that Sherrese sees it over the holiday break and maybe tells other people. If we start thinking about that per episode cost coming way down, $1 million, $2 million in episodes, and I know people ask me, well, how in the world? I don't know. I'm not the creative one in front of or behind the camera. But thinking through that, there's definitely an ROI on $5 to $8 million for audiences that are really specific around thinking about a nuanced story. And so that then creates more opportunity for people who are diverse to be at the table to spend that kind of money. We may be in more rooms where we can control that kind of budget. If you're only talking $100 million budget at a time to make something that's great, it's not that you're not deserving, it's now that you've turned your power over to somebody else. And so I believe it's twofold. One is, I don't care who's made that, even doesn't matter for who the audience is, but at $40 to $80 million for an 8-episode one-time show, it's gonna be really hard for anybody to see that ROI. And if you start thinking through how to think about the cost per dollar per hour that we're spending, whether it's serial content or the cost for producing long-form films, you start to create more access to opportunity because the path to audience is there. We can all videotape what we want today, and we can get it to audience tonight if we want to.
You can market, if you have the right people spreading the word, you can market in an hour.
If you go specific to audience, you can talk to audience in an hour.
Not that I am suggesting this, but the whole meme coin thing reflects that.
Yeah.
You can move people to do something if you have
if you have something compelling,
the right spin. You can move people
if you have something
in compelling ways.
Yeah, if you have something compelling, if you have great talent, You can get to audience quickly, and you can get to audience pretty efficiently. Where the model starts to go upside down is when it costs too much to even enter the conversation. And then so many people are then left out of the conversation because they can't enter. So there's that, and then you combine that with the old ways of doing things are still the prevailing ways, right? We still have large-scale, institutional Titanics, if you will, that have a lot of embedded costs. I mean, the costs are sewn into the walls of the building. They're in the wallpaper. They're in the ground. They're in the way that the businesses are built. And so it's really hard for them to move on a dime. Where I think there's real opportunity is in the independent space in a way that I've never seen. I grew up financing the film business, used to come to the south of France all the time for the film festival. And there was never a way 20 years ago to get to audience as efficiently. You still needed the machines to get there. Well, today you don't need the machines in the same way. So if you don't need the machines in the same way, then what we have to do is change the fundamental price point that we go so that we can empower more people to be at the conversation, to have that conversation around what gets made and what.
I want to talk more specifically about how you're doing that with macro, or your investments in macro with a company very like-minded. But I just want to say, just succinctly, we kind of breezed over some things, and what's so interesting is that in the last 10 to 15 years, for the longest time, the creative and the studio, their incentives were aligned. They were all going toward that goal of making a lot of episodes as efficiently as possible, and that back-end sale, then they would fight over the profit definitions and
Right.
net income and all of those definitions. But what changed and how incentives got disaligned was being paid a percentage up front where your upside was capped, so you were fighting for that percentage. For you as an investor and somebody that knew this market, did you see red flags? As those incentives started to go these two ways, did that tell you, wait a minute, this cannot end well? Because what we've seen in the last 12 months in Hollywood is literally a bloodbath of every major company almost at the same time, which I've not seen in my 30 years of covering Hollywood.
Yeah. I won't pretend to say that I was so prescient to think that this would end the way that it's ending today or the way that it's unraveling today. But I will say that, there has been a massive shift. To your point, it was all about getting to 100 episodes so you can get to syndication. And in syndication, you could be a screenwriter or a writer in the writer's room on a major series and still see life on the other side of that with respect to economic value.
An annuity.
An
that
annuity,
would
yes,
go
exactly.
to your grandchildren.
Exactly. And so that obviously got unwound. I think the thing that I would say I did see is that you saw the major technology platforms play a game that they knew their traditional counterparts could not win.
A game called parachuting billions of dollars
A
into
game called
Hollywood
parachuting billions of dollars.
to mess up everybody.
To mess up everybody's ecosystem. And I think, those technology companies, I'm a Wall Street kid, so that's my lane, that's what I know. And when you think about how they were valued by the market, they're valued by the market on growth, on subscribers, and on revenue. How are traditional media businesses valued? They're valued on profitability.
American dollars in the bank.
Yes.
As the CEO told me.
Yes, American dollars in the bank. So now you're playing a game where I'm a technology company, if you follow the tech boom, where it was all about burning cash, building revenue, and getting scale that got you the best, highest valuation, profitability be damned. And you have institutional media companies that have been around for a long time where the market values them on profitability. So the market did not give them the same length of time to burn billions of dollars at a lack of profitability that they gave the technology platforms. So they knew, it's almost like a game of chess. They knew, let me play a game that you can't win and then watch you unravel thereafter.
It's so true, and I have to shout it out, but the one person in Hollywood that had the spine to stand up and say so in the moment was John Landgraf of FX, now part of Disney. He will go down on record as the one person who had the spine to stand up and say, this is going to be a problem. And he was, and we all thought he was, we all thought he was a little overzealous, but in fact he was quite prescient. Let's talk a bit about Macro, and Macro, which, as I'm sure a lot of folks know here, is Charles King's production company. It's going on. I remember covering it when it launched. It's probably going on 10 years now. Can you talk about sort of the model there? What attracted you to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's Macro, or we also recently made an investment in a company called Mucho Mas, led by Javier Chapas, it is really about people who kind of understand how to identify where their audience is and who are thinking through alternative paths to getting to audience. And so both Charles and Javier have done that pretty efficiently, both as very prolific producers in their own right and building enterprises that meet that moment and are meeting the moment in real time with a much more flexible business model to be able to pivot against where the opportunity set is. So that's what we saw that was really interesting with them. Mucho Mas, who we also recently invested in, they are really great at making products for a price, specifically for the Latinx audience. So really high quality properties that have really great audience resonance, but not necessarily overinflated costs. So those are the things that we saw as really interesting, because again, back to this theme that we also see very clearly in music, is that when you go deep with audience, people show up. And as they show up, that turns into ROI.
That's the fan base that can be engaged. We're in Cannes. We're literally in the shadow of the Carlton Hotel. I am duty bound to plug the film, The Long Game, which from Mucho Mas. Has that been released in theaters yet? It's planned for
past theaters. It's now available on digital and DVD. So
there you go. Where most people will see it, but I have not seen it. But I did know it was one of those coincidence things. Just after I had this amazing sit down with Sherrese, like 2 days later, a page comes across my desk for proofing a review of The Long Game, which is a great feel-good period movie starring John Leguizamo, which I have to say I have not seen, but Variety gave it a rave, and we're always right. So, but it was just one of those coincidental things, and I was so happy. I was like, "Aw, got a rave from Variety."
Exactly.
But can you talk about that film's trajectory so far and how that kind of is reflecting your thesis of how you're going to move people?
Yeah, I think it's kind of consistent with the thesis that the themes that we've been talking about so far, in that partnering with a great production team that can think about making projects for a price, which is super important. Then you can go and talk to a specific audience and talk to them about a really great story, in this case, 4 Mexican Americans that wanted to play golf and loved the game, 5 Mexican Americans that loved the game of golf in 1956 in Del Rio, Texas, which obviously they weren't really allowed on golf courses. So they built their own golf course and they started their own golf team. They were in high school at the time. And they ended up winning the state championship. So really great family-focused film that we were able to release directly to theaters, then release directly to PVOD, and then it'll be on Netflix eventually thereafter. And so from an economic perspective, we feel really great about our position in that project. And we look forward to doing more things like that, where we're able to get stories out that are meaningful to an audience, directly to them at a price, and feel like we can live to see another day and put out more great stories in partnerships with other great operators.
Can you talk a little bit more broadly? Let's step back take one step back about HarbourView itself. You are you're not a holding company so much. You are a pure investment company. You are placing bets in interesting companies. Can you talk about the sort of the structure and the company you've built?
Yes. So in comparison to many of you here, I am the boring Wall Street girl. I grew up on the finance side. I spent over 15 years of my career at Morgan Stanley, focused specifically on things in the media and entertainment space. I left Morgan Stanley in 2019 to start my first investment company, and then left that to formally launch HarbourView in 2021. HarbourView is a thematically focused investment firm focused on investing in all things media and entertainment. We started our platform with $1 billion investment from an asset manager called Apollo Global Management to buy catalogs of music. We continue to do that pretty actively. We've grown our team. We've raised other funds outside of that to do things broader than just music, and we've invested, as I've said before, into operating platforms that are in the film and television space and continue to look actively for more things. We've grown our team successfully to about 30 full-time professionals. I'm grateful to have many of them here in the audience today. We're based in Newark, New Jersey, and yeah, that is us. We are specifically an investment firm. We are not trying to be an operator on the ground and operate with companies, but we do bring really great resources in our operating partners and relationships and senior advisors that we have to the firm to do things to support our portfolio companies in scaling their opportunity set or scaling a particular project in the market.
I understand with the long game, you were able to work, you had sort of some music synergy. Some of the music in your catalog was worked into, of HarbourView's catalog was worked into the film?
Absolutely. So what we did there was we partnered with a producer and we got them to create a song specifically for the long game. With
somebody
band,
that was in the portfolio.
Someone who's in our network. So we created a song with a group called Los Esquivales, and they did a specific song. They made a music video. They released it. So you'll see us do more and more of these things where we create this ecosystem where our ecosystem can talk to each other and they can really try to create value for all parts of the ecosystem.
And HarbourView's focus, of course, I have blinders on to the business of film and television and music, but HarbourView is also into sports. Those are your entertainment, media, sports are kind of your key pillars?
Absolutely. So we continue to look actively at sports. We have not made a bet there yet, but we are actively looking for the right opportunity for us. We have points of view around that as well. You know, in the sports side, I'm not really into purely betting that there's going to be more billionaires tomorrow than there are today, which is really kind of the underpinning of a sports thesis. Like the Patriots will be worth 10 times more later because billionaires want to have a playground to own sports teams. That's less of attractive to us. But what's more attractive is trying to find ways, again, to connect around the audience theme, which we know is highly engaged and very focused. So new sports, places that are more, that have more upside for growth, true organic growth or cash flow generation are places that we're spending time.
I mean, sports right now on so many levels is, you know, it's the scarce commodity that draws the mass audience for the live event. So that it's becoming even more scarce. So that has made it even more valuable at a time of fragmentation, and everything from, you know, from just the awakening in sports to women, to diversity needs, to the value of things other than the long established mainstream is really fascinating. I would imagine that there's a lot of that
there's
same
so
kind
much
of
excitement,
analysis and you know, heavy
Exactly.
thought that goes into how you're looking at the sports world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, as we look at, like, you know, women's basketball, which obviously has had an amazing year, right? The viewership, I think, outpaced for both the finals, outpaced the men's college championships. So you see that really being really interesting. I know at one of these stages on the beach this week is the founder and CEO of Love, which is a volleyball sports league that's been created. And if you track volleyball, there's actually a lot of engagement, especially women's volleyball here in the US and actually globally. Someone told me an anecdote recently, I don't know if it's true or not, I haven't fact-checked it, but that in India, outside of cricket, volleyball is the second biggest, most watched and engaged sport.
Wow, that would, I mean,
Because if you've ever been to a volleyball game, it's actually a super thrilling experience. It's super accessible. The sport is a very small field, and it's an easy game to understand, but it's very physical. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening in sports, and especially now that you can, again, back to the first central theme, which is we find what we want because it's now something that we can pull versus what is being pushed to us.
Right.
My almost 9-year-old son is completely obsessed with soccer, as is most young male boys, but he's not obsessed because it's coming on the television at 6 o'clock at night, because as we know, most of these games are airing at 2 a.m. or 3, odd hours for what it is for U.S. domestic viewing. He's obsessed because he's able to find it. He's pulling it first. His first introduction was FIFA and the games.
The video games.
The video game.
Right.
The second introduction was then finding all the clips on YouTube. Then the third is falling in love with Mbappe, right? And then all the gear. And so his complete obsession with the sport, and it's not only him, it's all of his friends, is so much more enabled because they have the ability to pull what they want versus having to sit down for Thursday night and Sunday night football with their parents because it was, again, fed to us.
And
So our thesis on sports is the same.
just as you talk about football, so interesting. More kids with all the concerns about football, and I dearly love, that's where I park myself on Sundays in the fall, but all the concerns about football, a lot more kids are playing soccer. And it occurred to me, while I was definitely a soccer mom, loved every minute of being a soccer mom, I had a lot of friends that were volleyball moms. And I wonder if that, volleyball has a lot of friends just with, especially with daughters, that really they played that in competition. And as that seeps into the culture 20, 30 years, that would make sense. So there you go again, looking around corners at what's coming.
Yeah, trying to look on the periphery and again, be able to see that audiences that are like myself. When I say like myself, just not the prototype. I'm not the prototype by definition. I'm obviously an African American woman. I'm female. Like I've got a bunch of things. I'm a child of immigrant. So understanding that the prototype is me, which means that me is a variant. There are multivariants. Every person is a multivariant. That means that you have to basically be open to where nuance exists and live there. But how do you serve that nuance with the right cost infrastructure?
And from a marketing perspective, that you think, well, that just means there's more ways to get to you.
Correct. Correct.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk turkey. It was reported that HarbourView was in the hunt for BET networks a couple of months ago. A little bird tells me that BET might be back on the block soon again. Would that be, I would imagine that would be a bigger swing, but is that something that you would be part of, that you're interested to be part of a group with? Or
I think, listen, anything that is about specifically getting to audience that is a platform are things that we're always interested in. All of the platforms, though, have the same set of challenges that we talked about, whether it's BET or any of the large platforms that exist out there. And so how do you think about cracking that challenge to pull those things together? As a consequence of that, we're going to be super price disciplined on anything that we look at, but we recognize and appreciate the scale of things that are really great brands, that have really great platforms, that have really great path and direct path to audience, and knowing their audience are always things that are attractive.
Thank you. That was a curveball I tossed at you. I appreciate you fielding that one.
Prep that one.
Let me just a little more broadly along those lines. Things like, Paramount has been having a fire sale or two, and some interesting assets could come on the block, and they're by no means the only one. Everybody talks about right now valuing content, putting that long-term value, as we've just discussed, putting a long-term value is hard, although it's not hard to see an 8-episode costume drama that costs even $5 million an episode, how you make your money back on that. But the general valuation of content. So as you look at things that come on the market, if there's something like a BET that is rooted in traditional media, is there a sort of a discount, like that's going to need reinvention for the new world? How do you value, not talking BET specifically,
I think it's a real question. I think if you just took a look at media stocks right now in the broad public market and took a look at how they're valued, they're definitely being valued at a discount. And that discount is largely because there is so much reinvention that does need to happen. With cord cutting on the horizon and people seeing that as needing to be underwritten as a decay curve, if you will, rather than as something as a growth engine, with audiences being this fragmented and with cost infrastructure being so high, you see all of these media stocks really trading, if you're just looking at public market comps as a proxy, really trading at significant discounts to where they were. So I do think that any investor is going to be taking that into consideration as they spend time looking at the business and trying to sort through what the right entry point is, particularly because, again, you have to start to take a shift towards what the future is. And we've got a lot of vision around that, but it's hard to pay people for the vision that you have to go execute. So,
Right.
it's trying to intersect those two things and try to find the right opportunity set.
Is any part of HarbourView have any kind of stock portfolios?
No,
Do you
we
have
don't
any
invest in
kind
the
of-
public markets.
Oh, okay. All right. So really, really betting on instinct and gut. Can you talk a little bit about your team, the
Yeah.
size of HarbourView? You are based in Newark, New Jersey.
Yes, we're based in Newark, New Jersey. We really enjoy that for a number of reasons. It gives us a bunch of stuff. One, selfishly, I'm a mom and I have 2 small children and I live in South Orange, New Jersey. It's easy for me to take my kids to school every day. Shout out to South Orange and to the Essex County family in the audience. We'll probably have the overrepresentation here on the beach. Yes, South Orange in the back. So selfishly, that was one. Second, Newark and Mayor Raz Baraka is deeply rooted in arts and culture and has centered the city's revitalization around that. And so as a company investing in culture and investing in broader media and entertainment, we felt like being annexed to that, being in the ecosystem allowed us to get some cultural currency. And then third, we really wanted to be a part of the new story for Newark. And if not us, then who is obviously goes the statement. And so that's a lot of the reasons why we're there. We happen to be in a really beautiful building. So any of you who are in the New York area, come see us. We're right across from the Prudential Center. The benefit is that all of our catalog acts on the music side, they perform literally across the street at the Prudential Center. And we have a pretty sustainable footprint. So
There's a lot going on in Newark in terms of building entertainment and media infrastructure. It's a really nice example of and sadly a rare example of all the local politicians and civic pulling together for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there are film studios in Newark now. There are really great tax incentives for film production companies, I think on the order of magnitude of 30 to 35%. It's one of the largest in the country. And so we've seen a lot of things like, I don't know how many of you are a fan of Diaria from Detroit. It's one of my most favorite watch things right now. Yes, if Diaria Kilpatrick is somewhere here on the Quaset, I'm a fan. I'm, fangirling. But all based in Detroit, shot in lovely Newark, New Jersey.
Don't tell the Michiganders, they'll be upset.
I won't tell the Michiganders, but yes.
That's awesome. Well, this is a brand conference, and as we wrap up here, let me get your thoughts about, talk about businesses that are in various stages of disruption. We don't even have time to talk about AI, but certainly advertising and marketing and reaching audience is being influenced by these new tools. What do you think, from your perspective, is sort of most interesting about what's going on in the brand and sponsorship market right now, and where do you think people should be looking for those future moves?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is, one, I'm a student, so I'm learning. I will not profess to be fluent in the marketplace yet at all, but what I think is really interesting is watching brands come closer and closer and closer to content creation and finding ways to create that intersection so that they can get richer ROI for themselves, however they measure ROI in terms of audience engagement and audience engagement around their brand or their messaging for a particular moment, and cultural relevancy around that. I think it's really interesting to watch those things come together. We'd be excited to find the right brand partners to partner with around some of those themes as well. So we are watching it very closely because obviously, again, old media is shifting so rapidly, even though it tends to be a fairly efficient place for brands to continue to spend time. How do they start positioning themselves for this next era and how it shapes up going forward, I think is really interesting. So we continue to look for ways to partner there.
I talked to somebody earlier today that said that CMOs are now basically little mini studio heads because they are creating so much branded content, so much in many cases content with e-commerce woven in, that they're actually producing more content beyond just creative marketing materials than ever before, which tells you a lot about where the marketplace is going.
Yeah, I would think that again, being able to have direct one-to-one relationship as a brand has got to be your number one priority, or number one goal, rather. And so the more intimate that you can create that relationship, the more cultural currency that you can buy as a brand in partnership with creators is the way to be thinking about the future. I would also probably think that this is the way to service those brands, right? If you think about content companies and media companies being in the client service business, that client service of a truly integrated approach as to the way that you think about servicing those clients so they not only feel, but see the ROI on the dollars that they're spending, I think is going to be really important in this next wave.
Oh yeah, NBC Universal has been telling people, media press, that one of the big things out of this Olympics is they're going to have an ROI report for all their advertisers like they've never been able to deliver before coming out of the Olympics, which tells you that actual sales at the cash register or the virtual cash register is becoming a metric.
100%. And what I think should be empowering for creators in this moment, and you should ask for it, you should get as close to it as you possibly can, is getting as close to that data metric that the advertisers are going to require for your own information as well, because that will give you a sense for how much you deserve to be compensated, how much you deserve to be sitting at the table in order to see that same ROI. So I think it's a really important thing, and I think you'll continue to see that more and more. Like Issa Rae and I did a panel a couple years ago at the Milken Conference, and one of the things that still sticks with me to this day that she said was that when she did Awkward Black Girl, she had more information coming out of her YouTube engagement about who her audience was, how engaged they were, and who was showing up than she does producing for large systems or large streamers
HBO.
Where, the information is more opaque. And so that information to me is power, and the reason why I know that is true is because that's what we invest behind in the music space. We take a name-blind approach to the way that we think about music. As a consequence, we have a really beautifully diverse array of music, and unsurprising to many in this audience, things that are not pushed down from you are not the only things winning. For example, we see a lot of really amazing things in the Latin space, in the regional Mexican space, in Afro beats, in regional music coming out of Asia, which if you only listen to the things that came from the top down, you would think that these are small things, they were uninvestable, or what have you. But being able to follow the data allows me to see this is where the cash-on-cash return is coming from, and as a consequence, that's where we spend time. When content creators for video, for television, for film, for short form get close enough to the data so they can see the same thing, you will change the trajectory of how you can be invested in completely. Now, some people may not like it because you may have made something that nobody else is seeing. There's an honesty in the data that not everybody loves. But when you have the data, that data becomes currency. And so I believe strongly that creators, in the same way that advertisers need to demand it, creators need to demand it as well, because it'll give them some real currency on which they can trade.
It's the new profit participation.
Correct.
Well, we could keep going until they tell us to stop, but I'm going to make the executive decision here that this is going to be my last question. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. I am going to ask you, since you have done in a short time, have a really good track record, what is it that because I can tell by talking to you that you and your team, you really scout people. It's not people don't come to you in a nice portfolio with a little cover. You're going to comedy clubs, you're going to one-woman shows. You guys are really scouting for talent. What is it? Is it an undefinable thing? What is it that when you see somebody that an artist, talking about artistic talent, when you see an artist that you go, or a producer, like, I'm going to invest in that person, what is it that puts somebody from being like interesting to I need to be in business with that person?
The first thing is going to sound hokey because it just is what it is, but like, I'm all about good people and good humans. I just don't have time. Time is too short, and our brand is too precious to us to be engaged with people who we don't believe are good humans. We can't see it all. We don't know what everybody does in their personal lives, but it is very much so kind of an outside barometer at the first instance. The second instance, particularly with companies that we're going to engage with, management teams, it's really around value alignment. It's like, It's around the value alignment, around the couple things that we think about. Be pure and true to who the audience is. We believe that instinctually. We've seen it in everything, and I'm not just talking about doing it for Black and Latin audiences. We own heavy metal music, and the reason we own heavy metal music is because we see how engaged they are with their audience and how committed they are as a fandom. If you are not committed to the audience that you're serving, you're going to be serving everyone and no one at the same time, and that is a cause for a lower opportunity to achieve a great ROI. So value alignment around who your audience is, knowing that intimately and super serving them is super important to us. And then obviously, as we've talked about a lot here, we're investors. The only way I continue to get more money to do what I do is I've got to give all the pensioners in Los Angeles County and in, on the East Coast and at the state of Maryland and other places who have all been investors of ours and good partners to us as a firm. If I don't give them a return back, I will not get more money to do the next thing. So we're really focused on people who are value aligned around delivering a return, committed to that. They've got to be as hungry as we are. We're super hungry. People think that I did this overnight. Well, really, it's a 20-year dream that happened overnight, right? Or that feels like it happened overnight, but it's 20 years in the making. So it really is about those three value alignments. You got to be hungry. You have to be good people, and you have to know who your audience is.
This is amazing advice, folks. Sherrese, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you.